Welcome back to The Explainer. So it's June 17, 2026, and the ink is literally barely dry on a massive memorandum of understanding signed just a couple of days ago between the United States and Iran. But here's the thing. Instead of bringing a sense of calm or clarity to the region, this agreement has basically sparked mass confusion among analysts. Today, we're diving straight into a totally fascinating analysis by Professor Zhang Shuiqin, who argues that the mainstream perspective is completely missing the big picture. He proposes that what we are witnessing right now isn't the end of a conflict, but the grand finale of a hidden, highly calculated strategy.
I want you to consider this core question, because honestly, it's a real mind-bender. What if everything the world thought was happening in Iran was only part of a much bigger plan? While Washington believed it was pressuring Tehran through sanctions, diplomacy, and military threats, Iran may have been playing a completely different game all along. According to the ideas often discussed by Professor Zhang, Iran's strategy was actually never about winning a direct head-to-head confrontation with the United States. Instead, it was about surviving just long enough to change the battlefield itself.
Okay, let's dive into this and map it all out. First, we'll look at the confusing peace deal. Then, Stage 1, strategic patience. Stage 2, weaponizing uncertainty. Stage 3, globalizing the game. And finally, reshaping the battlefield.
Section 1, a confusing peace deal.
To truly grasp why Professor Zhang's theory is gaining so much traction, we really have to look at the immediate, completely contradictory fallout of the MOU signed on June 15th. The deal gets signed, right? The world breathes this collective sigh of relief, expecting everyone to de-escalate. But literally hours later, Iran does something wild. They immediately move their central bank operations straight to Moscow, basically throwing up an aggressive economic shield. And at the exact same time, their military publicly declares a posture of eyes open, hands on the trigger. I mean, talk about whiplash. The peace deal is signed, and almost instantly, Iran pivots to an intensely aggressive defensive and economic posture.
And when you look at what was left out of that agreement, it's pretty staggering. We're talking about massive strategic elements left totally untouched. Their entire missile program, completely unaddressed. That vast regional proxy network, left fully active. And perhaps most startling, 440 kilograms of near-weapons-grade uranium was just left intact. To put that into perspective, that is a massive stockpile of leverage sitting right on the table. It really raises the question, if the central bank is tucked away safely in Russia, the military is on high alert, and all these massive threats are untouched, what exactly did America just negotiate?
Which brings us to Section 2, Stage 1, Strategic Patience.
Professor Zhang lays out this strategy in 3 distinct steps. First, patience, which is all about endurance and delay. Second is uncertainty, using asymmetric warfare. And finally, a global shift, expanding the scope of the whole game. Let's dig into that first one.
The first stage was patience. For years, Iran negotiated, delayed, and absorbed tremendous pressure while steadily improving its capabilities. Every single round of nuclear talks bought them time. Every new economic sanction just forced domestic adaptation. Rather than seeking some immediate, flashy victory against a superpower, which is highly unlikely anyway, Tehran focused entirely on endurance, learning lessons from other countries that survived pressure from much larger powers. The years of perceived weakness were actually a highly calculated period designed just to buy time.
Moving to Section 3, Stage 2, weaponizing uncertainty.
Once they bought that time, how do they level the playing field against a conventional military juggernaut? The second stage was creating uncertainty. Instead of responding in predictable ways, Iran relied heavily on asymmetric strategies that made it incredibly difficult for opponents to calculate the true cost of escalation. Basically, these are unpredictable, non-traditional tactics designed to completely neutralize an opponent's conventional advantages. They didn't try to match the US tank for tank. Instead, they made the risk of conflict impossible to quantify.
You see, military planners in Washington absolutely thrive on predictable metrics. They can estimate missiles, count aircraft, and track troop numbers, but uncertainty itself became a weapon. Iran deliberately used unpredictable responses, hidden economic costs, and complex proxy actions. The more difficult Iran was to predict, the harder it became for its rivals to build a clear, definitive strategy. They essentially forced Washington to fight shadows instead of solid targets.
Section 4, Stage 3, globalizing the game.
Then came the third stage, and honestly, this is the most important one. According to this analysis, Iran intentionally shifted the focus from a regional dispute to a massive global strategic problem.
Suddenly, any conflict involving Iran could potentially affect global energy routes, disrupt international markets, and draw in the broader competition between major rival powers. The issue was no longer just Tehran versus Washington in a vacuum. It became intricately connected to the entire global balance of power.
The result? Washington found itself facing massive questions it hadn't fully anticipated. Was military pressure enough anymore? Would sanctions still work? Could a regional conflict actually remain regional? These completely weaponized uncertainties created confusion and forced U.S. policymakers to seriously consider risks extending far, far beyond the Middle East.
And finally, Section 5, Reshaping the Battlefield.
Now, taking a step back, we really have to look at this subjectively. This framework is a debated theory, not undisputed fact. Critics are quick to argue that many of these predictions are pretty speculative and rely heavily on broad historical analogies rather than hard, concrete evidence from within the Iranian leadership. We have to acknowledge it's entirely possible that Iran was simply surviving day by day, reacting to Washington's moves, rather than executing some flawless master plan.
But here's the thing. Whether one agrees with Professor Zhang's conclusions or not, his central argument is incredibly fascinating. Iran's objective was never to defeat America directly. The objective was to survive, adapt, and reshape the strategic environment until traditional American advantages simply became less effective. What looked to the world like desperate delaying tactics might have actually been years of quiet, meticulous preparation. The real story isn't what happened on the battlefield, it's how the battlefield itself was changed.
And that raises the biggest question of all. Was Iran simply reacting to chaotic events, or was it quietly following a long-term, three-stage strategy all along? If the answer is yes, then what looked like years of weakness may actually have been years of brilliant preparation, because sometimes the most dangerous move an opponent can make is simply surviving. Thanks for tuning into this explainer. Until next time, keep analyzing the bigger picture.